The council station hung in the void between stars, a massive structure built by a dozen different species over 300 years. Inside its great hall, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for another day of endless discussion. Among them sat Ambassador Ji Woo, the human representative, her dark eyes watching the proceedings with quiet patience. Captain Daehyun stood at the entrance of the hall, waiting for his turn to present the trade agreements. He had been to the station many times before. Each visit was the same. The other species treated humans like children who had stumbled into a room full of adults. They smiled at human ideas, nodded politely at human suggestions, and then did whatever they wanted. Daehyun did not mind. He had his orders. Be polite, be patient, show them nothing. On the raised platform, Overseer Krelthus called the session to order. The ancient crystalline being's voice echoed through the hall like wind chimes in a storm. Beside him sat Varmex, the Talon ambassador. The four-armed reptilian creature looked down at the humans with barely concealed amusement. To the Talon, humans were weak. Soft skin, no claws, no natural armor. They could barely lift what a Talon child could carry. Jiwoo rose when her name was called. She walked to the speaking floor, her movements graceful despite the heavy gravity the station maintained for its larger species. She presented her proposal calmly. Humans wanted access to mining rights in the outer sectors. Fair compensation would be provided. It was a reasonable request. Varmex laughed. The sound was like rocks grinding together. Several other ambassadors joined him. Why would anyone give mining rights to humans? They were too fragile for such work. Their ships were small and plain. Their technology was adequate, but unimpressive. No, the mining rights would go to stronger species. Species that could handle real work. Jiwoo smiled and returned to her seat. She did not argue. Daehyun noticed her hand move to her datapad. She was sending a message to Earth. He knew what it would say. They still underestimate us. Good. The session continued with other matters. Trade disputes, border disagreements, resource allocation. Everything was handled through endless debate and compromise. This was how the galaxy worked. Peace through discussion. Violence was barbaric, something left behind by primitive civilizations. Then the emergency alert sounded. The great hall fell silent. Emergency alerts were rare. Overseer Krelthus activated the main display. Images filled the air above the council floor. A mining colony. Fires burning in the darkness of space. Ships torn apart. Bodies floating among the debris. The Vraxian Empire had attacked. Daehyun felt his heart rate increase. He controlled his breathing, kept his face neutral. 3,000 beings had lived on that colony. 700 of them were human. The display showed no survivors. The council erupted into chaos. Voices shouted in a dozen languages. Ambassadors demanded action. Overseer Krelthus called for calm. It took 20 minutes to restore order. When the hall finally quieted, Krelthus explained what they knew. The Vraxian Empire, an insectoid civilization from the Galactic East, had been expanding aggressively for months. They had made demands. When those demands were refused, they attacked. The mining colony was their first major strike against a council-protected territory. Ambassador Jiwoo stood. Her voice was steady, but Daehyun could hear the steel beneath it. She called for immediate military response. The Vraxians had committed an act of war. They had murdered thousands of innocent beings. They had violated every treaty and law the council held sacred. Action must be taken. Vermex spoke next. He agreed the attack was terrible, but military response required unanimous council approval. That was the law. War was a last resort, something to be avoided at all costs. Perhaps sanctions would work. Perhaps negotiations. Other ambassadors joined the discussion. Some supported action. Many did not. They feared the Vraxians. The insectoid empire was powerful, their military vast. A war would cost millions of lives. Better to seek peace, even if that peace came at a price. Hours passed. The debate continued. Daehyun watched Ji-woo's face remain calm while ambassadors discussed acceptable losses and strategic withdrawals. They spoke of the dead colonists as numbers, as acceptable casualties in the pursuit of continued peace. Finally, Ji-woo requested the floor again. She walked to the center of the chamber. Her voice carried clearly to every corner of the vast hall. She spoke of the humans who had died. Miners and engineers and families who had trusted in the Council's protection. She spoke of children who would never grow up. She spoke of justice, of responsibility, of the meaning of civilization itself. Then she said the words that Daehyun had been waiting for. The human delegation formally requests military action against the Vraxian Empire. If the Council refuses, humanity will act alone. The hall erupted again. Several ambassadors shouted, "Act alone? Impossible." Humans had no real military. They had merchant ships and transport vessels. They had defensive stations around their colonies, nothing more. What could they possibly do against the might of the Vraxian Empire? Varmek stood, his forearms gesturing dismissively. He spoke directly to Ji-woo, his voice dripping with condescension. The humans were upset. This was understandable. They were young and emotional. But they must not let grief cloud their judgment. War was not their nature. They were traders, diplomats, mediators. They had no experience with real conflict. They should let the stronger species handle this matter. Once proper consensus was reached, Ji-woo looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at each ambassador in turn. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. So quiet that the entire hall leaned forward to hear. "Do not mistake our diplomacy for inability," she said. "Do not mistake our patience for weakness. Do not mistake our preference for peace as ignorance of war." She paused, letting the words settle. "For 30 years, we have sat at this council. We have traded fairly. We have negotiated honestly. We have sought peaceful solutions to every problem. And you have thought us soft, weak, helpless." Her eyes locked onto Varmek's. "You have no idea what we are capable of." Varmek laughed. Other ambassadors joined him. The sound filled the hall. Humans threatening war? It was absurd. It was almost cute, like watching a small animal puff itself up to appear larger. Ji-woo did not react to the laughter. She simply bowed to Overseer Krelthus and returned to her seat. As she sat down, she glanced at Daehyun. He saw the message in her eyes. It begins. Daehyun touched his communication device. A single coded pulse transmitted across the light years to Earth. In the solar system, receivers picked up the signal. Computers analyzed the code. Orders were issued. The laughter in the council chamber continued. None of them noticed Ji-woo's slight smile. None of them saw Daehyun leave quietly through a side exit. None of them understood what was about to happen. In the darkness between stars, ancient shipyards began to wake. Weapon systems came online. Soldiers received their orders. Fleets prepared to move. Humanity had tried peace. Peace had failed. Now they would show the galaxy what humans truly were. Admiral Hygiene stood in the command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean. Around her, holographic displays showed the entire solar system. Green markers indicated human positions. Red markers showed potential threats. For 30 years, those red markers have remained theoretical. Not anymore. The emergency session of the Global Assembly had lasted 6 hours. The vote had been unanimous. Every nation on Earth agreed. Every colony in the system supported it. The Vraxians had committed an act of war. Humanity would respond. Hyjin had been waiting for this day since she joined the Navy 40 years ago. She had trained for it, planned for it, hoped it would never come. Now it was here, and she felt the weight of 3 billion lives resting on her shoulders. Colonel Taeyang entered the command center, his Reaper Corps uniform showing the wear of 20 years of service. He saluted sharply. Hyjin returned it. "Orders, Admiral? Take your team to the mining colony. Find survivors. Recover the dead. I want evidence of everything the Vraxians did there." Taeyang's jaw tightened. "And if we encounter Vraxian forces?" Hyjin met his eyes. "Then show them what happens when they murder our people." Taeyang smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. He saluted again and left to brief his team. Across the solar system, hidden bases came alive. On the dark side of the moon, massive hangar doors opened for the first time in 3 decades. Ships emerged, their hulls dark and angular, designed to scatter sensors and absorb radiation. These were not merchant vessels. These were not exploration ships. These were warships. Mars Station activated its construction yards. What the galaxy thought were simple manufacturing facilities were actually the largest military shipyards humanity had ever built. Dreadnoughts and carriers that had been carefully assembled, piece by piece, now moved under their own power. The asteroid belt revealed its secrets. Mining facilities were also weapons platforms. Refineries doubled as ammunition factories. Thousands of automated defense drones, small and lethal, began their patrol routes. On Europa, beneath kilometers of ice, submarine bases launched their vessels into the frigid ocean. These ships were designed to operate in any liquid environment. Soon they would hunt in the methane seas of Titan. Eventually, they would hunt in the void of space itself. The mobilization took 3 days. On the 4th day, the Vraxian Empire noticed. Warlord SKRTCH stood in his command ship, his insectoid body clicking with agitation as he reviewed the reports. The humans were moving ships. Many ships. His scouts had counted hundreds, then thousands. Their analysis suggested advanced weapon systems, military-grade armor, combat-ready crews that had made no sense. Humans were weak. Their technology was adequate for trade, nothing more. Where had these ships come from? Skrutch sent a message to the human vessels approaching the destroyed mining colony. It was simple and direct. Leave now or be destroyed. The colony belonged to the Vraxian Empire. All resources in this sector now belong to the Empire. Humans should return to their small corner of space and accept reality. The human response came from Colonel Taeyang. His message was even simpler. No.skr single quotes TCH felt his mandibles click in amusement. The humans wanted to play war? Very well. He dispatched a scout fleet. 20 ships, heavily armed, experienced in combat. They would chase off these human toys and continue claiming the sector. The scout fleet entered the Kepler 442 system 3 days later. Their sensors swept the area, looking for human ships. They found nothing. Empty space. Debris from the destroyed colony. Nothing else. The fleet commander reported this to SKRTCH. Where were the humans? Had they fled? Then the first ship disappeared. No explosion. No warning. One moment it was there, transmitting normally. The next moment, silence. The fleet commander ordered combat formation. Sensors at maximum. Weapons ready. 3 more ships vanished in as many minutes. The remaining commanders panicked. They could not see the enemy. Their sensors showed nothing. Yet their fleet was being torn apart. One captain finally caught a glimpse. A dark shape against the stars, visible for just a second before it vanished again. He transmitted the image before his ship joined the others in death. Scourge studied the image. A human stealth destroyer. Small, fast, nearly invisible to sensors. But how could something so small destroy a Vraxian warship? He found out when the scout fleet finally managed to score a hit. The human ship took damage, and its stealth systems failed for a moment. In that moment, every scanner in the fleet locked onto it. They saw everything. Point defense turrets that moved faster than thought. Railguns that fired projectiles at incredible speeds. Electronic warfare systems that jammed and confused. Missile pods that launched smart weapons capable of independent targeting. And armor. Dense, layered armor that absorbed energy weapons and deflected projectiles. The human ship destroyed 6 more Vraxian vessels before jumping away, leaving only 3 survivors from a fleet of 20. Skr single quotes TCH watched the battle recordings 3 times. This changed things. The humans had real military technology, but they were still just one species. The Vraxian Empire was vast, powerful, experienced. 20 ships were nothing. He would send 200 next time. He issued orders for a full battle fleet to assemble. Standard Vraxian doctrine. Overwhelming force. Simple tactics. The humans would learn that stealth and tricks were no match for true military might. The fleet gathered at Vrax Station 3. 200 warships, from small frigates to massive dreadnoughts. Thousands of Vraxian warriors, each one bred for combat. This fleet could conquer systems. It would be more than enough to handle human resistance. They moved toward human space with confidence. On the human side, Ensign Ba'ura sat at her weapons station aboard the dreadnought Valiant. She was young, only 24. But she had trained her entire adult life for this moment. Around her, the bridge crew worked in quiet efficiency. Captain Dahayan, transferred from diplomatic service to military command, sat in the command chair. He had grown up in space. He understood void combat better than most. More importantly, he understood the enemy. He had watched them, studied them, learned their patterns during all those years of playing diplomat. Now he would use that knowledge. The Vraxian fleet entered the system. Their formation was exactly what Dahayan expected. A standard battle formation, designed for direct engagement. They came in like a hammer, ready to smash anything in their path. They expected the humans to run or to meet them head-on. They did not expect what actually happened. The Valiant emerged from behind the system's largest moon, its railguns already firing. The battle had begun before the Vraxians even knew the humans were there. Ba'ura's targeting computer painted enemy ships in her display. She touched the firing controls with steady hands. The railgun spoke. Projectiles moving at 5% of light speed crossed the distance in heartbeats. Kinetic energy tore through Vraxian shields and armor like paper. 3 ships exploded in the first volley. 5 more in the second. The Vraxian fleet tried to turn to face this unexpected threat. But turning a fleet in space takes time. Time they did not have. More human ships appeared, flanking the Vraxian formation. Destroyers and cruisers, their weapons adding to the devastation. The Vraxians finally managed to return fire, but their shots hit empty space. The human ships moved in patterns that defied prediction, their coordination perfect. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 140 Vraxian ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors jumped away in panic, their messages filling the communication channels with fear and confusion. The humans had not lost a single vessel. Ba'ura sat back in her station, her hands shaking slightly. Captain Dahayan's voice came over the ship-wide communication. "Good work, everyone. Let them run. Let them tell their commanders what happened here." In Vraxian space, Warlord SKRTC received the survivors' reports. He watched the battle recordings in silence. His mandibles did not click. His body did not move. He simply watched as his fleet was destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing he had ever seen. For the first time in his military career, Scrooge felt something unfamiliar. Fear. The footage spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species with communication technology saw it. The Vraxian fleet, proud and powerful, torn apart in minutes by human warships. The images were clear. The devastation was absolute. The implications were terrifying. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Great Hall was packed with ambassadors and observers. Every seat was filled. Every eye was on the humans. Overseer Krelthus spoke first, his crystalline voice sharp with urgency. The council demanded an explanation. How did humanity possess such military capability? Where had these warships come from? Why had humans hidden their true strength? Ambassador Jiwoo stood calmly. She had expected these questions. She had prepared for this moment for 30 years. She explained it simply. Humans had always possessed military capability. They had never hidden it. They had simply never discussed it. The council had assumed humans were weak because humans preferred peace. That assumption was the council's mistake, not humanity's deception. Vermex interrupted, his forearms gesturing angrily. This was a violation of trust. The council operated on transparency. Members were supposed to share information about their capabilities. Humans had broken that understanding. Jiwoo smiled. It was not a warm smile. She reminded Vermex that no council law required full military disclosure. Many species kept secrets. The Talon themselves maintained classified weapons programs. The difference was that no one had bothered to ask humans about their military. Everyone had assumed humans had nothing worth asking about. That assumption had now been corrected. She continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Humanity's formal declaration of war against the Vraxian Empire was now filed with the Council. Human forces would operate under standard wartime protocols. Any species that aided the Vraxians would be considered hostile. Any species that remained neutral would be respected. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Then she explained human military doctrine. Overwhelming force. Rapid deployment. Total commitment. When humans went to war, they did not fight by halves. They did not engage in limited actions or symbolic gestures. They fought to win, and they fought with everything they had. The hall was silent. Several ambassadors looked uncomfortable. War was supposed to be civilized, measured, controlled. What Jiwoo described sounded like savagery. Rickson, a Talbon journalist, recorded everything. He had covered conflicts before. Small border disputes, trade wars, resource competitions. But this was different. This was total war, a concept most galactic species had abandoned millennia ago. He requested permission to embed with human forces. Jiwoo granted it. Let the galaxy see what happens when humanity is pushed to violence. In human space. The war machine continued its buildup. Dr. Yoonji worked from a command center on Earth, analyzing Vraxian psychology and tactics. She was a military psychologist, one of the best humanity had produced. Her job was to find weaknesses in the enemy's thinking. She identified several key points. The Vraxians were hierarchical. They followed orders without question. Their tactics were rigid, based on established doctrine. They valued strength and despised weakness. They did not adapt well to unexpected situations. Her recommendations were clear. Hit them where they do not expect. Break their supply lines. Force them to adapt. Show them that humans do not fight by their rules. General Sung-ho received her analysis and incorporated it into his battle plans. He commanded the ground forces, soldiers trained for combat in every environment. His troops were ready for deployment. The first target was identified. a Vraxian supply depot in the Gamma sector. It was heavily defended, considered impregnable. The Vraxians kept 3 months of supplies there: fuel, ammunition, food, replacement parts. Everything their fleet needed to continue operations. Colonel Taeyang led the assault. His Reaper cores dropped from orbit in stealth pods, landing 50 kilometers from the depot. They moved through the planet's dense forests in complete silence. Vraxian sensors detected nothing. The attack began at midnight local time. Explosions ripped through the depot's power generators. Darkness fell. Then the Reapers struck. They moved like ghosts, their thermal camouflage making them invisible to Vraxian sensors. Their weapons were suppressed, nearly silent. They struck targets with precision, taking out command posts, communication arrays, and defensive positions in coordinated strikes. The Vraxian defenders never knew what hit them. By the time reinforcements arrived, the depot was burning. 90% of the supplies were destroyed. The Reaper cores extracted with 0 casualties. Rickson watched footage of the raid. He had seen Vraxian military installations before. They were fortresses, designed to withstand siege. Yet humans had penetrated one in hours and left it in ruins. He began to understand why other species were afraid. The pattern continued across Vraxian territory. Human forces struck supply lines, communication hubs, repair facilities. They avoided direct fleet confrontations. Instead, they cut away at the Vraxian war machine piece by piece. Freighter Captain Haewon was running cargo between human colonies when she picked up a distress signal. A civilian transport was under attack by Vraxian raiders. She changed course immediately. Her cargo ship was not a warship. It had basic defensive weapons and some armor plating, but nothing designed for real combat. Still, she could not ignore a distress call. She found the civilian transport surrounded by 3 Vraxian corvettes. They were toying with it, firing shots that disabled but did not destroy. They wanted prisoners. Haewon transmitted on open channels, identifying herself as a human vessel. The Vraxian raiders ignored her. She was just a cargo ship. No threat. That was their mistake. Haewon had been a Navy pilot before becoming a freighter captain. She knew how to fly, and she knew how to fight. She pushed her ship's engines to maximum building speed. Then she shut down everything except life support and emergency thrusters. Her ship became a missile. 40,000 tons of cargo and metal, moving at combat speed, aimed directly at the lead Vraxian corvette. The Vraxians detected her too late. They tried to move, but space combat is about momentum and vectors. They could not evade fast enough. Haewon's ship struck the corvette dead center. Both vessels exploded in a flash of released energy. The shockwave damaged the other 2 corvettes enough that the civilian transport could jump away. General Sungho received the report 4 hours later. Haewon had saved 140 civilians and eliminated 3 enemy vessels. Her sacrifice would not be forgotten. The story spread quickly, not through official channels, but through the civilian networks. People across human space heard about the freighter captain who turned her ship into a weapon to save others. She became a symbol: determination, courage, the refusal to abandon those in need. The Vraxians tried to regroup. Warlord SKRTCH ordered his forces to consolidate at Vrax Prime, the fortress world at the heart of the Empire. It was the most heavily defended planet in Vraxian space. Orbital stations bristled with weapons. The planet's surface was covered in military bases. Millions of warriors stood ready to defend it. Scorch believed it was impregnable. He was wrong. General Sungho planned the assault carefully. This would not be a raid. This would be a full siege. Overwhelming force, just as Ambassador Jiwoo had promised the Council. The human fleet arrived in the Vrax Prime system 4 weeks after the war began. 200 ships. Dreadnoughts, carriers, cruisers, destroyers. They came in formation, their weapons hot, their shields at maximum. The Vraxian defenses opened fire. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the fleets. Human ships took hits. Some were damaged. A few were destroyed. But the fleet kept coming. Then the human carriers launched their fighters. Thousands of small craft, piloted by humans and coordinated by advanced AI. They swarmed the Vraxian defensive stations. Like angry insects, the orbital battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, every Vraxian station was destroyed or disabled. The way to the planet's surface was clear. General Sung-ho gave the order. Orbital bombardment began. Not against cities or civilians. Against military targets. Command centers. Weapons factories. Troop staging areas. The bombardment was precise and devastating. Then the ground forces deployed. Marines in powered armor dropped from orbit. Armored vehicles and heavy weapons followed. Aircraft provided cover. Everything worked together, a coordinated assault that overwhelmed the defenders. The Vraxians fought hard. They were brave and skilled. But they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that used every advantage, every weapon, every tactic in perfect harmony. The siege of Vrax Prime lasted 6 days. On the 7th day, the Vraxian defenders surrendered. Rixon stood on the planet's surface, watching human soldiers accept the surrender. He recorded everything. The discipline, the efficiency, the complete absence of unnecessary cruelty. These humans were terrifying in battle. But they were not monsters. They followed laws of war. They treated prisoners properly. They provided medical aid to wounded enemies. He realized something important. Humans did not enjoy war. They were simply very, very good at it. Back at the council station, the ambassadors watched the footage from Vrax Prime in silence. No one laughed anymore. No one made jokes about human weakness. They finally understood what Ambassador Jiwoo had tried to tell them. 3 months had passed since the war began. Vraxian space was collapsing. Supply lines were broken. Communication networks were disrupted. Military bases were destroyed or captured. The empire that had threatened the entire sector was falling apart. But victory had a price. Lieutenant Yuna walked through the medical bay of the hospital ship Mercy. Row after row of beds held wounded soldiers. Some would recover fully. Some would carry their injuries for life. All of them had paid the cost of humanity's decision to fight. She stopped beside a young Marine. He was awake, staring at the ceiling. His left arm was gone below the elbow. The prosthetic would be good, almost as functional as the original. But it would not be the same. Yun checked his vitals, made notes in his chart. She wanted to say something comforting. She had no words that felt adequate. The Marine turned his head to look at her. "Did we win?" "Yes," she said quietly. "We're winning." He nodded and closed his eyes. "Good." Yuna continued her rounds. The medical staff was efficient and professional. They saved lives every day. But even they could not save everyone. Some injuries were too severe. Some soldiers did not make it to the hospital ships. She filed her daily report to Admiral Hai Jin. The physical casualties were documented. The psychological ones were harder to measure. Soldiers dealing with trauma. Pilots having nightmares. Marines who could not sleep without seeing the faces of the enemies they had killed. Her report was blunt. Humans were winning the war, but they were also losing something of themselves. The longer the fighting continued, the harder it would be for these soldiers to return to normal life. Admiral Hai Jin read the report in her command center. She understood the cost. She had commanded ships in combat. She had ordered attacks that she knew would result in casualties. Each decision weighed on her, but the alternative was worse. If humanity had not responded, if they had let the Vraxian attack go unanswered, what message would that send? That humans could be killed without consequence. That aggression would be tolerated. That weakness invited more violence. No, they had to fight. They had to win. The cost was terrible, but the price of losing would be worse. A priority alert interrupted her thoughts. Commander Insu was reporting from the stealth destroyer, Shadow's Edge. His ship had been conducting reconnaissance deep in Vraxian territory. They had found something. The message was encrypted and marked urgent. Hygiene opened it immediately. What she read made her blood run cold. The Vraxians were building a planet-killer weapon. A massive station, hidden in a remote system. It used exotic matter and focused energy on a scale that defied belief. One shot could crack a planet's crust. Multiple shots could destroy a world entirely. And their primary target was Earth. Hygiene immediately called an emergency command meeting. General Sungho joined from the Ground Forces Command. Colonel Taeyang connected from his forward base. Ambassador Jiwoo linked in from the council station. Insu provided the details. The weapon was almost complete. It needed another 2 weeks for final calibration. Then it would be operational. The Vraxians were rushing to finish it. They saw it as their last hope to turn the war around. Sungho studied the station's specifications. It was heavily defended. Thousands of automated turrets, fighter squadrons, a fleet of warships stationed nearby. And the station itself was massive, built from reinforced materials designed to withstand fleet bombardment. A direct assault would be costly. Very costly. But there was no alternative. The weapon had to be destroyed before it became operational. Taeyang volunteered his Reaper Corps for the mission. They would infiltrate the station, plant explosives in critical systems, and destroy it from within. It was a suicide mission. Everyone in the meeting knew it. Hygiene asked the question anyway. What are your chances of success? Taeyang did not hesitate. 70% chance we destroy the weapon. 10% chance anyone makes it out alive. The command channel was silent. Then Jiwoo spoke from the council station. The council has been pressuring us to accept a ceasefire. Several species want this war to end. They're afraid of what humanity is becoming. They're afraid of what will happen if we push too far. Hygiene understood the implication. If they refused the ceasefire and launched this attack, the galaxy would see humans as the aggressors, as the dangerous species that would not stop fighting. What do they think will happen if we let the Vraxians build a planet killer? Hygiene asked. Do they believe the Empire will use it responsibly? Jiwoo's response was bitter. They think the Vraxians will negotiate once the weapon is complete. They think it will be a deterrent, not an active threat. They're wrong, Sungho said flatly. The Vraxians will use it. Probably on Earth, they want to break our will to fight. The decision fell to Hygiene. She was the supreme commander. The responsibility was hers. She made it without hesitation. We destroy the weapon. Colonel Taeyang, you have authorization to proceed. Use whatever resources you need. The operation launched 3 days later. The Shadow's Edge carried Taeyang's team deep into Vraxian space. Insu's crew were the best pilots in the human fleet. They needed to be. The journey would take them through heavily patrolled sectors. They were detected twice. Both times, Insu outmaneuvered the Vraxian ships, hunting them. His destroyer was damaged, but still operational when they reached the weapon station. Taeyang's team deployed in stealth pods, approaching the station from multiple angles. The Vraxian sensors were focused outward, watching for fleet attacks. They were not expecting infiltrators. The Reapers breached the station's hull in 6 different locations. They moved through the corridors like shadows, avoiding patrols, disabling security systems. Their target was the station's reactor core. Overloaded, and the resulting explosion would destroy everything. they encountered resistance halfway to the core. Vraxian guards had finally detected the intrusion. Alarms rang through the station. Blast doors sealed. Combat troops deployed. Taiyang's team fought their way forward. The corridors became killing zones. Railgun rounds and plasma bolts filled the air. Reapers fell, but the survivors kept moving. Outside, the Vraxian fleet realized what was happening. They moved to intercept the Shadow's edge. Insu had orders to cover the Reapers' escape. He engaged the fleet with every weapon his ship had. The destroyer was outgunned and outnumbered. Insu knew it. His crew knew it. They fought anyway. The Shadow's edge traded fire with Vraxian warships. The destroyer's armor held against the first volleys. Then a lucky shot penetrated the engine section. The ship lost power to its main drives. Insu switched to emergency thrusters. The ship was crippled, but still in the fight. He ordered all remaining power to weapons. If they were going to die, they would take as many enemies with them as possible. Inside the station, Taiyang reached the reactor core with only 4 of his original 20-person team still alive. They planted the charges quickly, their hands steady despite the chaos around them. The timer was set. 5 minutes. Enough time to reach the extraction point, if they ran. If they were lucky, they were not lucky. Vraxian reinforcements blocked their path. Hundreds of soldiers positioned between the Reapers and their escape pods. There was no way through. Taiyang made his decision. He ordered his team to find another way out. He would hold this position, buy them time. They argued. He pulled rank. They obeyed. The 3 remaining Reapers made it to an emergency airlock. They jumped into space, trusting their suits to keep them alive long enough for pickup. If pickup came, Taiyang stood alone in the corridor, his weapon raised. The Vraxian soldiers charged. He fired until his ammunition ran out. Then he drew his combat knife. He never stopped fighting. The timer reached 0. The reactor exploded. The blast consumed the entire station in seconds. The Vraxian fleet nearby was caught in the shockwave. Half their ships were destroyed instantly. The Shadow's edge, drifting powerless, was outside the blast radius. Barely. Insu's sensors detected 3 emergency beacons. 3 survivors. He launched a recovery team immediately. They pulled the survivors aboard 30 minutes later. 3 Reapers. Not Taiyang. Back on Earth, Admiral Hai Jin received the report. Mission success. Weapon destroyed. Casualties catastrophic. Colonel Taiyang killed in action. She read the report 3 times. Then she composed the notification that would go to Taiyang's family. There were no words that made this easier. No comfort that felt adequate. She sent the message. Then she sat in silence, staring at the display that showed human positions across the sector. They were winning the war. But the cost kept rising. At the council station, Speaker Melther arrived from the Centauri Union. His species were philosophers and teachers, devoted to peace and understanding. He had traveled to Earth to plead with humanity, to accept a ceasefire. What he found there surprised him. The memorials were everywhere. Parks dedicated to the fallen. Museums documenting human conflicts throughout history. Libraries full of books about war and its consequences. Humanity did not glorify violence. They remembered it. They studied it. They understood the price. Melther attended a funeral for soldiers killed in the recent fighting. He watched families grieve. He heard the speeches honoring the dead. He saw the children who would grow up without parents. He realized something important. Humans knew the cost of war better than any species in the galaxy. 4 months after the war began, Matriarch Zixtra emerged from the depths of Vrax Prime. She was the true leader of the Vraxian Empire, ancient and powerful. She had ruled for 300 years through conquest and expansion. Never in that time had she faced defeat. Until now, her empire was broken. Her fleets were scattered. Her worlds were under human occupation. The weapon she had hoped would turn the war around was destroyed. And still the humans kept coming, relentless and unstoppable. She called for a council of her remaining military commanders. Warlord Skrtch was among them, though his rank meant little now. Most of his forces were gone. He stood in the council chamber, his insectoid body scarred from battle, his confidence shattered. Zixtra spoke in the clicking language of her people. The humans had proven stronger than anticipated. Continued resistance was futile. The Empire would sue for peace. Several commanders protested. To surrender was shameful. Better to fight to extinction than to accept defeat. Zixtra silenced them with a gesture. Pride had already cost them too much. She would not sacrifice her entire species for the sake of honor. She sent the peace proposal through neutral channels. The terms would be harsh. She knew this. But any terms were better than annihilation. The proposal reached Earth 3 days later. President Chanmi reviewed it with her cabinet. The Global Assembly would need to vote. But she wanted to understand what humanity wanted before that vote took place. She met with Admiral Haijin. The Admiral looked tired. 4 months of continuous command had aged her. The weight of every decision showed in her eyes. Chanmi asked the question simply. Can we win if we keep fighting? Haijin did not hesitate. Yes, we can destroy the Vraxian Empire completely. It would take another 6 months. Maybe a year. The casualties would be significant. But we would win. Should we? That question took longer to answer. Haijin thought about the soldiers in the medical bays. The families receiving death notifications. The young Marines who would carry their trauma for the rest of their lives. They committed the crime, Haijin said finally. But they're offering to accept the punishment. If we keep fighting now, we're not seeking justice. We're seeking revenge. Chanmi nodded. She had reached the same conclusion. She brought the peace proposal to the Global Assembly. The debate lasted 2 full days. Some representatives wanted total victory. Others wanted peace immediately. Eventually, a consensus formed. The terms would be harsh but achievable. Reparations for the destroyed colony. Full demilitarization of Vraxian forces. War crimes tribunals for those who ordered the attacks. Occupation forces to ensure compliance. The terms would last 50 years. It was punishment. But it was also a path forward. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity would accept peace. President Chanmi traveled to the council station to present the terms personally. The great hall was packed. Every species wanted to witness this moment. She stood at the speaking floor, her voice calm and clear. She outlined the terms. She explained humanity's reasoning. The Vraxians had attacked without provocation. They had murdered thousands. Justice required accountability, but justice did not require annihilation. Humanity would accept the Vraxian surrender. The war would end. Then she addressed the council directly. For 30 years, humans had sought peace through the council systems. When that peace was violated, humanity had acted alone. The council's laws required unanimous consent for military action. Those laws had failed. She proposed new protocols. Any attack on a council member would trigger immediate defensive response. Not full war, but protection. Member species would commit forces to defend each other. It was a mutual defense pact, something the galaxy had never attempted. Several ambassadors protested immediately. This would drag them into conflicts they had no interest in. This would require military commitments they were unwilling to make. Ambassador Su Bin stood. She was Ji Wu's replacement, younger but equally sharp. She explained the alternative clearly. Without mutual defense, the strong would always prey on the weak. the galaxy would descend into constant conflict. Individual species would need to maintain massive militaries for self-defense. Resources would be wasted on weapons instead of development. With mutual defense, aggression became too costly. Attack one member, face all members. It was simple deterrence. Peace through strength. The debate continued for weeks. Eventually, a modified version was approved. The Human Accords, they were called. Not all species joined immediately, but enough did to make it effective. Humanity offered another service: military advisors. Human officers would help other species modernize their defenses, not to create armies, but to ensure every species could protect itself if needed. The offer was controversial. Many species feared human military influence, but others remembered what happened when the Vraxians attacked. They remembered the Council's inability to respond. One by one, species began accepting human advisors. Admiral Hygiene formally retired 6 months after the war ended. She had served with honor. She had led humanity through its greatest military challenge. But the cost had been too high. She could no longer bear the weight of command. She established a memorial station at the site of the destroyed mining colony. Every year, a ceremony would be held there. Humans and other species would gather to remember the 3,000 beings who died, and to remember why the war had been necessary. Commander-in-Chief received the Medal of Valor, humanity's highest military honor. His ship had been destroyed, but his actions had saved the mission. He accepted the medal quietly. His crew had died. The honor felt hollow. The 3 Reapers who survived Taeyang's mission also received medals. They did not consider themselves heroes. They had lived while their commander and teammates died. That was not heroism. That was luck, but they attended the ceremonies. They told the story of Taeyang's sacrifice. They ensured his name would be remembered. Captain Jaesum commanded the peacekeeping vessel Olive Branch. His mission was to help rebuild worlds damaged in the war. Human engineers and medical personnel traveled with him. They worked alongside Vraxian civilians, repairing infrastructure, treating the injured. The work was slow and difficult. Many Vraxians hated humans. They had lost family members, homes, entire cities. The hatred was understandable, but slowly things changed. A human medic would save a Vraxian child's life. A human engineer would restore power to a hospital. Small actions. Individual kindnesses. They added up. Young Kickstar was one of those children. He had been injured in the bombardment of a military base. Human medics found him in the rubble and treated his injuries. They saved his life. He grew up in the occupation period. He saw human soldiers who were firm but fair. He saw human civilians who helped rebuild his world. He learned their language. He studied their history. He discovered something surprising. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years. Terrible wars. Millions dead. But they had also built peace after each conflict. They understood both war and reconciliation. When he was old enough, Kickstar joined the cultural exchange program. He traveled to Earth, studied at their universities, learned their ways. He became a bridge between species. There were thousands like him. Young beings from different species who grew up in the post-war galaxy. They did not remember the old divisions. They saw possibilities. Journalist Rickson published his account of the war. He called it, "They Were Never Weak." The book became required reading across the galaxy. He documented everything. The battles, the casualties, the human approach to warfare. But he also documented something else. The human capacity for mercy. The care they showed prisoners. The precision of their attacks to minimize civilian casualties. The speed with which they shifted from warfare to rebuilding. His conclusion was simple. Humans were terrifying in battle because they understood war so well. But they also understood peace. They could wage war with fury and make peace with compassion. The Galactic Council adapted to the new reality. Humanity was no longer seen as weak. They were respected, feared, yes, but also trusted. When conflicts arose, human mediators were often requested. Their word carried weight because everyone knew they could back it up. Ambassador Subin became the face of this new humanity. She was diplomatic and professional, but when she spoke, species listened. They remembered what happened when humanity was pushed too far. She often quoted Ji Woo's words from the beginning of the war. Do not mistake our diplomacy for inability. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. The galaxy had learned that lesson. 10 years after the war, the Council held a commemoration ceremony. Representatives from every member species gathered. They remembered the fallen. They celebrated the peace. President Chanmi attended, though she was no longer in office. Admiral Haijin came out of retirement for the event. Ambassador Ji Woo traveled from Earth, where she now taught diplomatic history. They stood together on the council station, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was different now. More united, more aware, more careful. Do you think we did the right thing? Haijin asked quietly. Ji Woo considered the question. We did what was necessary. The cost was terrible, but the alternative would have been worse. Chanmi nodded. The galaxy is safer now. Not perfect, but safer. They stood in silence, remembering the soldiers who died, the civilians who suffered, the price of peace.